Hey everyone, welcome back. Ethan and Brandon here again to talk about another potential free agent for the Chicago Cubs. This time around, we're bringing up a guy that I keep banging the drum for. I know that a lot of people disagree with me on this one, but Willy Adames. Just real quickly, recap. Obviously, we all know that he's been with the Brewers for the last 3 or 4 years. They've really turned him into a superstar since they got him from the Tampa Bay Rays. He's a power hitting solid fielding. His metrics were down a little bit this year, but in the past, he's been great defensively. Middle infielder, shortstop. Obviously, the Cubs have Dansby Swanson. I'm not advocating for him to leave, but I think that the Cubs have, the Cubs need power, and Willy Adames provides a lot of power.
It kind of is the question of where do you put him though? Because do you replace him? You don't want to take Dansby Swanson's place, but do you put him where Dansby Swanson is? Do we put him at the DH spot? Do we maybe put him in the base slot? It's hard to say, but I am in agreement with you that we need more power. I mean, the entire 2024 season, you and I have gone back and forth of should Cody Bellinger go to another team? He's not what he used to be. We're gonna get flack for that, but we need more power on this team. I think, some of these younger guys like Pete Crow Armstrong is starting to kind of get up there. But again, I'm kind of with you on this one that it would be nice to have somebody like Willy Adames on the team. He's a power hitting threat, but at the same time, it's the question of where do we put him?
Yeah, it is a question of resources. How do you allocate them? Because the Cubs have payroll space this year. They've got somewhere around 70-ish, 80-ish million dollars under the first threshold of the competitive balance tax, which is a lot of money, but obviously, that can disappear pretty quickly, especially once arbitration starts. And, if the Cubs sign a couple of notable free agents. So there's definitely an argument to be made that, there's just a better way for the Cubs to spend their money this offseason. Maybe they get a Corbin Burns or Max Fried. They're probably not going to get Juan Soto, unfortunately. But, there's other guys out there that they can use to really bolster the rest of the roster. But here's my argument. The Cubs, people remember last offseason, didn't really make any moves to the lineup, like super duper notable moves. They brought Cody Bellinger back, but that was just bringing a guy back. It was just retaining a player who was already there. And the Cubs offense was not very good in 20, I feel like people are sort of like, gaslighting themselves a bit. The Cubs offense was not good in 2024. We traded Christopher Morel for Isaac Paredes, and he was terrible after the trade deadline. I hope he picks it back up. I believe that, he has a great track record as a young player, but you can't just assume that this guy's going to pick it back up and become like this all-star third baseman. The Cubs need to make a move to improve the offense. Where else are they going to do it on this roster? The outfield's completely accounted for now that Bellinger's back. Seiya Suzuki's probably going to be the DH, assuming they keep him and all three of the other outfielders. There's no catchers out there that, you can pair with Miguel Amaya to completely make the offense great. Danny Jansen's been fine in the past, but he was terrible, not terrible, but not great in 2024. Where else are you going to, make an offensive improvement, besides, bringing up more prospects and finding spots for them? I think a guy like Willy Adames, assuming you can't get Juan Soto, is as good as it's going to get. He's a perennial 30 homer threat. He stole a career high 21 bases last year. His OPS is always near 800. Again, he's been a really good fielder in the past, and if you move him to third base, he's probably going to be even better there. I the money I understand is a problem, but taking one of the best players from right now, the Milwaukee Brewers, I don't know why you wouldn't do that.
I think it always, so for our younger viewers out there, it always feels like from the episode of SpongeBob where he forgets his name, and there's that image of SpongeBob's brain where everything is kind of on fire. It kind of feels like that in this 2024 season, and hopefully 2025 looks a little bit different. But I want to kind of compare it to we need that fire extinguisher. Where's the fire extinguisher for this fire? And I think again, a power hitting threat like Willy Adames might be the answer to that. And again, I'm with an agreement to you on that. And I think, but I also love playing devil's advocate with you, Brandon. We've been friends for a long time. And I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I think sometimes that, and you've brought it up here, at the end of the day, the MLB and, the Cubs franchise is a business. And I think that's something that Jed Hoyer is thinking about, where it's like, where does the money come from? What players are we going to get rid of? They're investing so much money probably into Cody Bellinger, who is their big power hitting threat right now. Where does the money come from at the end of the day? And, they're who knows, how the season went for the Cubs overall. Are we getting enough butts in seats? I mean, there's so many questions to ask. At the end of the day, also, I'd like the Cubs to go back to the World Series. And I think, again, I'd like to say, and it's controversial, I think Willy Adames is the key here because our defense was okay. I think it really kind of lifted off in the end of the season. It was a little too late for it, but I think, again, if we replaced somebody like Isaac Paredes and put Willy Adames in the third base slot, I think we'd be pretty golden there, defense wise.
Yeah, I mean, again, you'd have one of the best infield defenses in baseball. You'd have a power threat in the lineup finally. The Cubs had who I think Ian Happ led the team in home runs with like 25 last year. 25 led the team in home run. Like that's insane. Like that across an entire 162 game season, 25 home runs, leads the team. Like come on. Like I'm not saying we need a 50 homer power threat like Pete Alonso or Aaron Judge, but like the Cubs need to hit some home runs out here. It's the easiest, fastest way to score runs, right? And so I just think, I'm not advocating for getting rid of Paredes. His value, there's no reason to sell low on him, but hold on to him, make him a utility player. Maybe, let him platoon over at first base with Michael Busch for a bit. But the whole point of baseball is getting the best players and figuring it out later. Willy Adames would immediately be one of the 3 to 5 best players on the Chicago Cubs. If the money makes sense, if, obviously he has a qualifying offer attached, but if the money makes sense, and if Jed Hoyer thinks that power is the biggest Cubs need, which I certainly do, I think the move just makes too much sense not to make.
I guess the last question I have, because I mean, you're very much you follow the Cubs way probably more than anybody should, and that's not an insult. That's more of a compliment. What was it in 2016? There was this whole reshaping of the Cubs.
Mhm.
Is this the next reshaping of the Cubs? It's all speculative right now, but we've added people. We haven't really dropped a lot of big name Cubs, players right now. Do you think Jed is going to reshape the Cubs in any way? When is the next like year of the reshaping? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, literally a decade ago, like from, basically from today, the Cubs signed John Lester to that big 6-year contract in 2014, and that was sort of the move that famously like lifted the Cubs out of that rebuild, and then a couple years later they won the 2016 World Series. I do think that there's a chance this offseason to make a similar kind of move. I'm not necessarily saying that Willy Adames is that move. I'm not saying like a Max Fried or Corbin Burns is that move. It's hard to know in the present. That's sort of a hindsight kind of thing. But the team has gone 83 and 79 in back-to-back seasons. Like this isn't a bad team. This is a team that's close to making the playoffs, but they're stagnating. They're stagnating in the middle of the crop. And obviously they have prospects coming up. Guys are improving, but sometimes you need to supplement a good roster with a great player. And I think a guy like Willy Adames could be that sort of signing, that move that pushes the Cubs from, this mediocrity treadmill to a playoff contender.